The race to be the world's clean energy leader. Competition and cooperation as China's President Hu Jintao meets with President Obama.
We're moving ahead with our U.S.-China Clean Energy Research Center and joint ventures in wind power, smart grids, and cleaner coal.
And Energy Now takes you to China to look at how they're taking control of their energy future.
China is investing in the clean energy revolution. They intend to be one of the world leaders. The United States needs to be a world leader as well.
And it's a renewable energy jackpot. We take you to the only place in the continental U.S. that holds the triple promise of solar, wind, and geothermal.
What you have here is pretty compelling evidence of why the Imperial Valley is the largest known geothermal resource in North America.
This is Energy Now. Hello, I'm Susan McGinnis. Welcome to Energy Now, a weekly look at America's energy challenges and what we're doing about them. This week, we focus on clean energy, which many believe is the key to economic growth and job creation. We'll look at the visit from Chinese President Hu Jintao to the White House and clean energy partnerships between China and the U.S. We'll also debate the notion that clean energy technology is an engine for economic growth, and we'll show you one area of the nation blessed with a triple play of renewables. Well, first, there's no debating China's growing role in energy worldwide. And with relations between Washington and Beijing tense in many areas, the White House sought to encourage partnerships in clean energy technology and business between the two countries during Chinese President Hu Jintao's visit to the White House this past week. Potential areas of cooperation: energy efficient building, advancing new technologies for EVs, and as the president noted, cutting carbon emissions.
I believe that as the two largest energy consumers and emitters of greenhouse gases, the United States and China have a responsibility to combat climate change by building on the progress at Copenhagen and Cancun and showing the way to a clean energy future.
Well, the president also announced that the U.S. and China are teaming on the Clean Energy Research Center, R&D facilities located here and in China, focused on energy efficiency, carbon capture, and clean vehicles. But obstacles remain, including what the administration calls unfair Chinese trade practices that it says hinder American industry from doing business in China. More on that in a moment. And some American trade practices have created friction, including a Buy American provision, part of a bill President Obama signed into law that prohibits the military from buying solar panels made outside the U.S. Supporters say provisions like that will help keep clean energy jobs here, but that's getting increasingly difficult. Energy Now chief correspondent Tyler Suiters traveled to China and saw firsthand why they're becoming the world's clean energy leader in our continuing look at the China factor.
Here in the U.S., we have Death Valley, Arizona, and there's Happy Valley in Pennsylvania, home of Penn State, go Lions. Even a Sun Valley, the ski mecca in Idaho. But to find a solar valley, I went to China. This is where the Hemin Solar Corporation has a solar hotel, a solar conference center, a solar university, and an entire team of green-jacketed solar employees, eager to show me why it all works so well. Among them, engineer Wang Jijian.
You can see the factory.
And it's worth looking. Solar Valley is a microcosm of China's entire clean energy industry, the fastest growing in the entire world.
China is extremely important for all kinds of obvious reasons. What's happening in China is shaping the world.
Half the world's top 10 solar panel companies are Chinese, and the country has a third of all the wind turbines on the planet.
We have the same clean energy resources that China does. The sun shines a lot here. We have, especially today, pretty considerable wind. Why is that country leading the way? Why aren't we?
Well, it's really very much part of the policy framework that the Chinese government has created domestically.
And the seeds for that green policy, they grow from three separate root systems: power, profit, and the planet. China has to keep up with its voracious appetite for electricity. It must generate more power.
China does everything big. I mean, China's power sector is growing at an extremely rapid rate.
Right. China's power demand, already #1 in the world, it's growing about 15% a year. That's an issue Chinese clean energy company ENN spotted almost 20 years ago.
Our core business was energy service. Then we saw that China had a huge opportunity in renewable energy.
and huge incentives from the central government, chief among them feed-in tariffs. Beijing charges customers a bit more for electricity and then guarantees a certain price to the companies that produce that electricity from renewable resources.
Renewables is still a market-oriented business. What the government did is just to make this influence bigger.
Beijing policy puts a premium on rapidly developing the clean energy sector. More new wind and solar plants than any other country.
It's a very high rate.
But isn't that some of an artificial inflation because of the government's incentives and
well, yeah, of course, because renewable energy resources are not competitive at all.
Exactly. They're expensive. Precisely why the government has to help. In the U.S., electricity demand is essentially flat. Utilities just don't need much new power. So Congress hasn't funded long-term policies for clean energy. Beijing has.
The government is supportive of companies like ENN. I think the government strategy is based on companies.
The obstacles? Well, China is desperate to build more transmission. Nearly half of its wind turbines aren't even connected to the grid. No one's getting power from them. And clean energy supplies only a small fraction of China's demand. Solar and wind, they produce just 1% of China's electricity. The U.S. total is about 3%.
As striking as some of the solar arrays can be here in China, the most eye-catching aspect about China's solar industry may be the manufacturing numbers. By the end of 2010, China will produce more than half the solar panels in the entire world, and of those, 95% will be exported outside of China.
So, the country is profiting from clean energy development, but Beijing stands accused of not playing fair, giving sweet land deals to Chinese clean energy companies. Off the coast of Shanghai, I visited the Donghai Bridge wind farm, several dozen gigantic turbines that started generating power just last summer. Turbines manufactured using only Chinese components.
We think it's reliable to use Chinese suppliers for our projects.
It was also the law when the bridge was built. Chinese parts for Chinese wind turbines, back when the government greenlighted the Donghai project 3 years ago. In December, the White House filed a case with the World Trade Organization, accusing Chinese clean energy trade policy of violating world trade rules, an accusation China strongly disputes.
Foreign suppliers were considered, but one, their products were much more expensive, and two, Chinese companies were ready to build the same quality turbines.
Beijing says it's backed off that rule, but other clean energy trade policies remain, like disqualifying foreign-owned wind companies from working on offshore projects. Beijing cites national security concerns. Last year, according to the Alliance for American Manufacturing, the U.S. lost 500,000 manufacturing jobs to China. The scene at this manufacturing facility in Solar Valley, workers without helmets, without eye protection, working this close to intense flames. This is the kind of thing the Alliance complains about.
We have world-class technology for concentrated solar, the biggest quality control system in the world, which improves quality.
That's the company line, but questions linger about Chinese quality. And the West says Chinese companies are able to sell below cost because of Beijing's subsidies for the clean energy sector. But as these two heavyweights fight for profit, a bigger prize is at stake: the planet. Both countries need to get off of coal or master the technology to clean up its carbon emissions. China now gets more than 70% of its electricity by burning coal, the most polluting source of energy. The U.S. total is about 45%.
I think it's an imperative that we work together, because at the end of the day, having an affordable, reliable, and clean is really what has to happen.
And Duke Energy's trying. The company has clean technology R&D partnerships in place with a pair of Chinese companies, partnerships that could generate jobs and lower costs here in the U.S.
China is investing in the clean energy revolution. They intend to be one of the world leaders. The United States needs to be a world leader as well.
But right now, it looks like we're following. Back to the Donghai Bridge. The Chinese put this offshore wind farm, their very first one, online back in July. The U.S.? After a decade of legal wrangling over this site near Cape Cod, Massachusetts, the U.S. has yet to plant even a single turbine in any of its coastal waters. In China?
The wind is so strong here on the East China Sea, and this project so successful, that the company behind it have decided to build a second wind farm. And it didn't have to look very far to find the next site.
on just the other side of the Donghai Bridge. Construction should begin by the end of this year on phase 2 of this project. And phase 2 will be just as big, if not even larger, than what's already in place. But maybe a clean energy win for either country could be considered something of a win for both. Carbon dioxide emissions, whether they come from Shanghai or Chicago, they all contribute to global warming. And don't we all, ultimately, want the same thing?
Our son, our grandson, have blue air.
Blue sky?
Yeah, blue sky.
Yeah. Blue sky. Ah, a beautiful sight in any language. In Dojo, China, Tyler Suiters, Energy Now.
And during President Hu's visit to Washington, several U.S. energy companies, including Duke Energy, GE, and Babcock & Wilcox, signed deals with Chinese firms for joint development of clean energy technologies. And GE and the Chinese government will work to bring China's high-speed rail technology to the States. Well, China's also making a big push into electric vehicles, and that's what's in this week's Energy Now Hot Zone. China is now the world's biggest auto market, with more than 18 million vehicles sold last year, and that's driven up the demand for imported oil. One solution, the EV. But with EVs, you need places to charge up. So there's word that China's working on a plan to add at least 10 million electric car charging parking spaces in the next 10 years. At the auto show in Detroit, Chinese automaker BYD showed off its line of electric vehicles. Up next, The Mix. Our panel talks about clean energy and whether renewable technologies should be supported with taxpayer dollars. And later, Imperial Valley, California, how one county has hit a trifecta of renewable energy as we continue our look at clean energy.
The odds of this daughter of a clergyman spending 11 weeks at #1 on the U.S. singles charts? 1 in 19 million. The odds of going on to win 6 Grammy Awards? 1 in 1.4 million. The odds of having a child diagnosed with autism? 1 in 110. I'm Toni Braxton, and I encourage you to learn the signs of autism at autismspeaks.org.
Welcome back. As we continue our focus on clean energy, time now for The Mix, as we look at whether the development of clean energy projects is one of the keys to boosting the economy. Joining me now is Amy Christensen, an Energy Now contributor and founder of Christensen Global Strategies. She works with companies on climate change policies. Also, Ken Green is resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Glad to see you both again. Let's talk about this prospect of clean energy technology and development as an engine of economic growth. President Obama certainly believes that it is. Here's a comment from him at his last State of the Union.
Providing incentives for energy efficiency and clean energy are the right thing to do for our future, because the nation that leads the clean energy economy will be the nation that leads the global economy, and America must be that nation.
Really? Ken, can clean energy really propel the economy and help lead the global economy?
No, and in fact, experience with clean energy projects in Europe have shown that by and large, they lead to more job loss than job creation. They lead to great deals of corruption, rent seeking, and basically higher utility rates and higher electrical rates for customers and ratepayers, and industry migration out of the countries that have tried this.
There's no doubt clean energy technologies are more expensive right now. Can they be a key to spurring growth?
Absolutely, and not only are they a key to spurring economic growth, but they're actually becoming increasingly cost competitive, and that's actually incorrect. The Spanish Department of Labor, and Spain has been a real leader on renewable energy, found that they have created 175,000 jobs in Spain from renewable energy. The European Union predicts that they will create 400,000 net jobs by 2020 in the EU from aggressive renewable energy policy.
If you look at both Italy and Spain, Germany and Denmark, the experiences with wind and solar power have led to more expensive power and net losses of jobs.
What about when the technologies become mature? Is it just a matter of waiting until then for it to become this engine of growth?
The technologies already are here. They're here, they're mature, and they're starting to be much more competitive, especially in rural areas of this country.
If you look at wind and solar, there's still such a tiny, they've been getting subsidies for years. There's such a tiny fraction of our energy pie.
What's so exciting is that finally those technologies have come into that price area where they are competitive with traditional technologies, and that's why wind was the #1 source coming on last year. So we are the Saudi Arabia of wind. We should be growing these technologies.
Are these sources already propelling the economy?
No, because they're still heavily subsidized. If these technologies were really competitive, you'd hear the Wind Association saying, don't give me the tax credits and subsidies. You'd hear the solar manufacturers say, we don't need stimulus money, we don't need tax breaks, or we don't need feed-in guaranteed prices for feed-in for wind or solar power. You'd be happy, they'd be saying, let's get rid of all the subsidies because we want to compete and we're going to beat the heck out of coal and natural gas and other forms of electricity production.
Well,
and that's not what they're saying.
Let me get a perspective of someone who actually advises on investments in clean energy production. Mark Fulton is joining us now. He's the Global Head of Climate Change Investment Research at Deutsche Bank. He tracks and advises clients on clean energy investments. And Mark, thanks for being with us. Do you think that clean energies are able to draw investments if they're not subsidized?
I think at the moment it depends which type of clean energies we're talking about. And I'd actually like to widen the discussion a bit to talk about cleaner energy. And in particular, I want to bring in natural gas. Natural gas has a much cleaner footprint than coal. It has 60% less carbon footprint. It doesn't create hazardous air pollutants that are damaging to health and so on. At the moment, gas is extremely competitive against coal.
Where are you advising your clients to invest in different areas of clean and cleaner energy? Where's the smart money going?
Well, to tell you the truth, we're a global unit, so we just don't look at America. So one of the key questions is which countries should you invest in? So we're looking for countries that do indeed want to support the clean energy push in a fair and equitable way. And therefore we look around the world and we see the opportunities in Europe, and particularly many of us are looking to China, where China is now emerging in leadership. It's the largest clean energy markets in the world, and so people are very interested there. In the United States, I think there are many opportunities, but we are very focused on the potential for natural gas in the United States, and we're already seeing a switch from coal to gas. And we think that this is something that will continue over the next 10 to 20 years.
So where does that leave us as far as subsidies? Should there be subsidies across all forms of energy, the traditional energies and the cleaner and clean energy?
What we need is to get all the subsidies out so that we can figure out which of these forms of energy really is the best. Because with the market so distorted, it's almost impossible to put a real price per kilowatt hour of nuclear power.
Amy, why shouldn't wind and solar and the cleaner energies have to compete with traditionals? With no subsidies.
We have decades of subsidies supporting the traditional and the legacy interests in this sector.
What if they all are gone?
And so if they're all are gone, what you're missing is that early startup phase of supporting these new technologies as they're commercializing, as they're coming to market. And this is where the world is going to competing globally. And that's what you heard from, give me a moment, that's what you heard from Mark Fulton. You have global investors looking where are they putting their billions of dollars. They're not bringing it to the United States in clean energy. And this is a global sector. They're going to China, they're going to Denmark, they're going to Spain. And that's where the jobs are being created. GE, you talked about government studies. GE did a study, and they showed that the investments the United States has made in wind were far exceeded by the benefits created. So the investments return. These are subsidies that return on investment, and they return on job creation.
GE wants to sell wind turbines. Of course they're going to say that.
GE sells a lot of
as
coal.
for subsidies, more subsidies, you just said earlier that these technologies are now mature. So there shouldn't need subsidies.
Wind power is absolutely mature.
And the idea that we keep subsidizing, my mother always said 2 wrongs don't make a right. So if it was wrong to subsidize fossil fuels, and now we don't like the consequences of this, greenhouse gases and so forth, why is it right to subsidize wind and solar power when we may not like the consequences either?
It's an future, and it's an investment in a transition that we're making. No, this investment, as we've said, this investment is far exceeded by the returns on that investment, and the job creation per dollar spent far greater in the renewable sector.
We'll have to agree to disagree on that. But I'd like to say, we heard the story before with ethanol, that, well, it only needs subsidies until it's a mature technology, and then we'll take away the subsidies. And now we have an absolute disaster with ethanol environmentally and economically, and it's still getting massive subsidies because you have an entrenched lobbying interest. And that's what wind and solar are turning into. The idea that they're going to turn away their subsidies ever is absurd.
All right, a final word from Amy.
Final word is we need to have an honest conversation about where we're going for our energy future. What are we willing to invest in, and what kind of returns do we want to see on the investment? And let's look across the board. Where are our priorities? Have a conversation with industry and with government and with the American people, and decide where our priorities need to lie.
All right, Amy Christensen, Ken Green, thank you so much for joining us. Mark Fulton in New York, thank you very much. Now let's get you plugged in to some of the top energy news. President Obama also talked clean energy when he launched a new jobs offensive at General Electric's manufacturing center in Schenectady, New York. That's where the company makes turbines, generators, and wind and solar equipment. The president tapped GE CEO Jeffrey Immelt to lead a new council on jobs and competitiveness. The president said jobs like those at the GE plant can put the economy into overdrive.
Our job is to do everything we can to ensure that businesses can take root and folks can find good jobs, and America is leading the global competition that will determine our success in the 21st century.
Massachusetts is demanding millions of dollars back from a solar firm, claiming the company took state aid and then decided to move to China. Massachusetts wants Evergreen Solar to give back more than $15 million of the grants and benefits it paid to get Evergreen to put a silicon wafer plant there. Evergreen says it only owes about $4 million. It's closing the plant, laying off 800 workers, and moving all manufacturing to China, where the company says it's cheaper and subsidized. Neglected machinery caused the nation's deadliest coal mine explosion in decades. That's the conclusion from the U.S. Mine Safety and Health Administration. MSHA says 29 coal miners would not have died last April if Massey Energy had kept the equipment working properly at its Upper Big Branch mine. Investigators say broken equipment sparked a small methane fire and kept workers from putting it out. That detonated coal dust Massey had let build up. Massey blames a rush of methane that overwhelmed its safeguards. Well, still ahead, an embarrassment of renewable riches. We take you to the only county in the continental U.S. that holds the triple promise of solar, wind, and geothermal energy. A renewables motherlode coming up.
Here we go. What? What?
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent, because kids in foster care don't need perfection. They need you.
When it comes to renewable energy, every part of the country has a different potential. The Midwest has wind, the West and Southwest solar. Hawaii is a hotbed of geothermal. But what if one area of the country held the promise of all three? That's what's happening in Southern California near the Mexican border in Imperial County. Energy Now's Lee Patrick Sullivan traveled there and shows us how the county is taking charge of its energy needs.
You know, I liken it to the gold rush, except I call it the green rush, where people are coming here to California to take advantage of the resources we have here.
Imperial Valley, California is literally bursting with resources. And County Executive Officer Andy Horn's desk is filled with maps showing where to find them.
People have called Imperial County the Persian Gulf of renewables. And I would say, looking at the number of resources and the diversity of resources that we have here, I'd have to agree with that.
And so do a lot of people. Horn's office is busy with a rush of green entrepreneurs trying to tap into the natural resources of this area. And those green prospectors don't have to look far.
Now, Andy, I look at this bubbling to the top, and I can't help but draw the parallel with the Beverly Hillbillies when the oil is just bubbling up from the ground.
Yeah, I think what you have here is pretty compelling evidence of why the Imperial Valley is the largest known geothermal resource in North America.
Geothermal energy has been tapped here for decades. This plant, run by Cal Energy, produces about 340 megawatts, or enough to power 300,000 homes. Two major fault lines have caused this geothermal paradise. The water temperature deep underground is around 700 degrees. It's pumped up through pipes and used to boil water, which creates steam. That turns a turbine, making electricity. Some estimates have this area capable of producing 22 gigawatts of power, or enough energy to shut down a couple dozen coal power plants.
This is it. This is the first one.
Larry Grogan is planning to build a new plant on this site. And when it comes to geothermal in the Imperial Valley, this isn't his first rodeo.
I came down here in 1975. I've gone through 3 boom and bust of renewable energy pushes and retractions, and This time, I think there's going to be some real players. I think there's going to be some real projects. And certainly seems to be a commitment from the government this time to follow through.
Federal stimulus money in the form of construction grants and California's commitment to renewables are what's giving Grogan confidence this time around. Now, if this was just about geothermal energy, it would be an okay story, but it's not.
So I'm standing out here in the sun. It's 112 right now.
Right.
I'm thinking heat stroke. You're thinking renewable energy.
Well, you know, as they say, our farmers have been using these photons for the last 110 years to make crops and grow crops for the rest of the nation. And we're hoping that we can use those same photons now to make energy.
And driving into the Imperial Valley, you can tell right away there's another untapped renewable source here. Wind, and lots of it. Nearby Palm Springs has similar wind, and look how they've developed it. Imperial Valley wants to get that same production. There's also a successful algae industry here for the production of biofuels. So with all this untapped green energy and California lawmakers mandating the use of that energy, why is it still untapped?
Energy transmission, getting the energy from here to where it's going to be utilized.
That's where the Sunrise Power Link comes into play. It's a 120-mile-long high-voltage line connecting Imperial Valley with San Diego County. It took 6 years to permit and just broke ground last November.
It's a renewable energy gold mine.
It was delayed because of opposition from people like Michael Shames, president of the Utility Consumers Action Network.
It's marring some really beautiful backcountry and in some cases national forests. The only real potential that the Imperial Valley presents is that of geothermal power.
But the folks applying for permits tend to disagree. So far, the Federal Bureau of Land Management has received 163 applications to build solar and wind projects on 1.6 million acres in California. Almost all of them are in the Imperial Valley. If approved, those contracts could be a boon to the local economy, one of the poorest in California. The 29% unemployment rate is the highest in the nation.
So what does that mean to get some of these jobs into this area for Imperial Valley?
Well, it means everything to the people that are here that are involved in trying to attract and promote this area as a region for renewable energy.
Not all of this is a sure thing. Only the geothermal plants can be used as base load electricity, and the water drawn up from the center of the earth here is mostly brine. So it has to be separated into pools where the solids are taken out and the water pumped back into the ground to replenish the source of energy. But even that may have its advantages.
Now, out of all the renewable energy sources the Imperial Valley already has, there could be another one on the way. You see, this brine right here that's used for the geothermal process, well, it contains manganese, lithium, and zinc, 3 major components to lithium-ion batteries that are used in electric cars.
And if that separating process can be commercialized, Andy Horn will have to add to his growing number of maps.
Do you think one day we'll call the Persian Gulf the Imperial County of Oil?
I don't know that, but
In the Imperial Valley, California, Lee Patrick Sullivan, Energy Now.
Well, that's it for this week's Energy Now. You can also watch our mixed panelists continue their conversation in our green room online at energynow.com. And look for us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Energy Now News. We'll see you next week.